The strike landed so swiftly I couldn't brace myself. My glasses flew off, crashing onto the polished ballroom floor, splintering in front of 130 stunned guests. My cheek stung, but the ache in my heart cut deeper. Juliet, my daughter-in-law, had just slapped me on her wedding day for refusing to surrender my apartment keys. "That's what you deserve for being so greedy," she shouted, her voice echoing through the hushed crowd. "An old woman like you doesn't need all that space." The silence that followed was suffocating. No one stepped forward to assist as I knelt, shaking, to gather the shards of my broken glasses. Some guests averted their eyes, uneasy. Others murmured among themselves. But not a single soul dared to stand up for the humiliated mother-in-law. My son, Ethan, stood frozen, staring at the floor as if I didn't exist. "You're no longer welcome here," Juliet went on, adjusting her flawless wedding dress. "Ethan and I need our space to begin our life together. Your apartment would suit us perfectly while we search for something better." Her words dripped with malice. For months, I'd endured her snide remarks about my faded wardrobe, my outdated car, my unassuming lifestyle. But this crossed an unforgivable line. I stood slowly, every gaze piercing me like a blade. Tears rolled down my face, but something inside me had shifted permanently. That slap wasn't just physical, it was the breaking point. For years, I'd lived quietly, embracing modesty and restraint. I held secrets even my son was unaware of. As I walked toward the exit, memories of the past few months flooded my mind. I recalled Juliet's first visit to my apartment 2 years ago. Her expression soured when she saw my simple home, my worn furniture, my modest kitchen. "This is where Ethan's mom lives," she'd asked him, her voice just loud enough to reach me. From that moment, every visit became a quiet torment. "Aurora, you should downsize," she'd said 3 months ago at a family dinner. "At your age, maintaining such a large place is too much. Besides, Ethan and I are planning for kids soon. We'll need more room." Her fake smile didn't fool me, though Ethan seemed oblivious, bending to her will like a marionette. The insults grew over time. First, it was my clothing. "Aurora, don't you own anything more stylish?" Then my car. "That old thing's a hazard to drive." Later, my part-time job at the flower shop. "Why's a woman your age still working instead of resting?" Each comment was a subtle jab, eroding my confidence. My name is Aurora Hughes. I'm 68, a woman who values simplicity over flashiness. I work 3 days a week at a local flower shop, drive a decade-old car, and shop for clothes at discount stores. To Juliet and the world, I'm just a widowed woman scraping by on a modest income. But that's the persona I've deliberately crafted for years. What no one in that ballroom knew was that my life before my husband's death was far different. Robert and I chose to live humbly, concealing our true wealth to shield our family's privacy, a choice that now felt eerily prescient. As I left the ballroom, the guests' whispers trailed me like a poisonous fog. "She looks so frail," Juliet's aunt muttered. "The bride's right. She can't manage on her own anymore," Ethan's cousin added. "She belongs in a retirement home," another guest said with hollow sympathy. Each word burned like acid on raw wounds. The ballroom's cool air clashed with the fire in my chest. My hand shook as I reached into my tattered black purse. A purse I'd used for 5 years, not from necessity, but because I valued function over flash, something Juliet would never grasp. I dialed a number etched in my memory, one I hadn't called in over a year, hoping I'd never need it. "Carlos, it's Aurora. Come to the Royal Oaks ballroom now." "Yes, immediately. Bring the documents we discussed. It's time they know the truth." My voice quivered, but a newfound resolve steadied it. "Are you certain, Mrs. Hughes?" Carlos asked, his tone professional yet concerned. "There's no one doing this." I glanced back at the ballroom, where Juliet laughed with her friends, likely gloating about putting her useless mother-in-law in her place. Ethan stood beside her, offering a weak smile, showing no remorse. "Absolutely certain," I replied. 30 minutes, Carlos. No later." I hung up and walked to my car with purpose. For the first time in years, I was ready to shed the facade I'd worn to protect my family. Soon, they'd meet the real Aurora Hughes. When that moment came, when truth shattered their carefully curated worlds, they'd learn the meaning of regret. In the quiet parking lot, lit by streetlights casting long shadows, I sat in my old sedan, waiting. 30 minutes until their lives changed forever. 30 minutes until they realized humiliating me was the gravest mistake they'd ever made. As I waited, memories of how I'd arrived at this moment surged like a tidal wave. It began 2.5 years ago when Ethan brought Juliet to my apartment, his nervous grin reminding me of his childhood. "Mom, I want you to meet someone special," he'd said. There stood Juliet, with her immaculate hair, designer outfit, and a smile that never reached her eyes. From the start, I sensed something off. Her gaze swept over my apartment, judging every corner with barely concealed contempt. "How charming," she'd said, eyeing my secondhand furniture and faded curtains, her tone implying anything but. Ethan, blinded by what he thought was love, missed the disdain in her voice. That first dinner was a quiet catastrophe. Juliet barely touched the meal I'd prepared with care, citing her diet. When I asked about her family, her answers were vague, but she probed into my finances with unsettling curiosity. "How do you manage on a widow's pension, Aurora?" "It must be tough to make ends meet," she'd said, her concern clearly feigned. What she didn't know was that I was studying her as closely as she was me. Over the following months, I noticed patterns that set me on edge. During their visits, she'd critique my outdated decor, suggesting I deserved better in my later years. But her eyes lingered on the apartment's prime location, the balcony's sweeping view, the spacious rooms. One day, while Ethan was out of earshot, I overheard her on the phone in my kitchen. "Yes, Mom. His mother's place is in a prime area. If we can convince her to move somewhere smaller, we could stay here until we find our own place. She's so gullible, she'll probably thank us for it." Her words sliced through me, but I kept my composure, playing the naive old woman when she returned to the living room. From then on, every interaction with Juliet was a calculated dance. She played the caring daughter-in-law, worried for my well-being, while I acted but inwardly I was collecting evidence, tracking her intentions, deciphering her motives. It was a chess game, each of us believing we held the upper hand. Her manipulations grew bolder over time. First came gentle hints. "Aurora, I've seen some wonderful senior apartments with all-inclusive services, no upkeep required." Then, more forceful prods. "It's risky for you to live alone at your age. What if you fall and no one knows?" Each argument painted me as incapable. Ethan began parroting her words. "Mom, Juliet's right. Maybe a smaller place would be better." Watching my son, raised with love and integrity, become her mouthpiece hurt more than any insult. After their engagement, the pressure intensified. Juliet's visits grew frequent, each one tenser than the last. She'd bring real estate brochures and pamphlets for retirement communities, saying, "I'm just looking out for you, Aurora. I want you to have the best life possible," as she spread them across my coffee table like a sales pitch. But I'd been doing my own digging. One afternoon, while they were out planning the wedding, I called an old friend in real estate. "Amelia, I need you to look into something. There's a couple very interested in my apartment, and I want to know their financial situation." What I learned was chilling. Juliet and Ethan were drowning in debt. Their extravagant $50,000 wedding was funded entirely by credit cards and loans. Their rented apartment faced eviction for unpaid rent. Their luxury cars were leased with payments they couldn't sustain. Their lavish lifestyle was a house of cards. It all clicked. The rushed engagement, the push for me to move, the constant jabs at my supposed fragility. It wasn't love driving them, it was desperation. My apartment in one of the city's most coveted areas was their escape plan. The realization struck like a blow to my core. My son, raised with values of honesty and effort, had chosen deceit over duty, letting an ambitious woman turn him against his own mother. In the weeks before the wedding, their tactics grew blatant. "Aurora, you're being selfish," Juliet said 3 days before the ceremony. "Ethan and I have sacrificed so much for this wedding. The least you can do is help with housing." Her words were no longer cloaked in false care. They were a demand. That night, I made a choice that would alter everything. I called Carlos, my trusted financial advisor since Robert's passing. "Carlos, prepare the documents. I may soon need to reveal what I've kept hidden for years." His voice grew grave. Mrs. Hughes, are you sure? Once this is out, there's no going back. It could destroy family ties. But my decision was final. The family I'd shielded with my silence had betrayed me. Now, sitting in my car in the ballroom parking lot, waiting for Carlos and the documents that would append everything, I knew the moment of reckoning was near. 25 minutes until Juliet, Ethan, and the guests who pitted me learned the truth about Aurora Hughes. 25 minutes until their fragile worlds, built on greed and lies, collapsed like dust. The night breeze stirred the leaves, casting flickering shadows under the streetlights. It was oddly fitting that such a lovely evening would mark the end of so many illusions. 20 minutes had passed since my call to Carlos, each second stretching endlessly. Through my car window, I saw the ballroom's warm glow, heard the music and laughter spilling out. It was surreal to think that soon, this celebration would become a nightmare for its key players. I closed my eyes, letting the most painful memories of recent months wash over me. I needed to recall exactly why I'd reached this breaking point. The worst humiliation came 2 weeks before the wedding, during what Juliet called a family meeting. She arrived at my apartment with Ethan and her parents, a calculated ambush. Aurora, we're here to discuss your future, her mother began, her haughty tone treating me like an inconvenience. It's time to make practical choices for your life, her father added, his appraiser's eyes scanning my home. Living alone in such a large space at your age isn't just unnecessary, it's unsafe. What if you have an emergency and no one knows? Their words were too polished, too rehearsed. Ethan sat silent, nodding like a programmed doll, his loyalty to me. Observing him seated there, beside a family who viewed me as nothing more than a hindrance, felt like witnessing the end of the light I had nurtured vanish right in front of me. Mother, he uttered at last, in a tone that felt utterly foreign to me. They're correct. Juliet and I have discussed it, and we believe it would benefit all of us if you relocated to a facility better suited to someone of your years. Better suited to my years, I echoed, sensing the fury starting to simmer within me. And who determines what's suitable for me? You do. Juliet's mom shared a meaningful glance with her spouse, as though my statement validated a topic they'd already covered. Aurora, we realize this might be tough to come to terms with, but you need to consider what's ideal for Ethan and Juliet. What's ideal for them? I whispered, starting to grasp the full scope of the scheme that had been plotted without my knowledge. And I guess my place would make an ideal spot for them to begin their life as a couple, wouldn't it? The uncomfortable quiet that ensued after my query provided all the confirmation required. They had orchestrated every aspect of this exchange, every point, every emotional tactic. Juliet stepped in then, unleashing her complete array of persuasive tactics. Aurora, it's not solely about the place, it's about your health and happiness. We've looked into options, and we discovered a fantastic community for individuals in your stage of life. It offers round-the-clock healthcare, group events, ready-made food. You might connect with others who relate to your experiences. Her insincere grin turned my stomach. What experiences? I inquired, pretending to be puzzled. And what precisely do you believe I'm dealing with, Juliet? She glanced at Ethan for backup before responding. Well, isolation, money worries, the anxiety of managing on your own. It's typical at your stage, Aurora. There's no shame in requiring assistance. The nerve of this woman in her late 20s lecturing me on what's usual for my generation stunned me briefly. But then I noticed a glint in her gaze that sent a shiver through me. The total conviction that she was entitled to my existence, my residence, my choices. To her, I wasn't an independent individual anymore, but a barrier to eliminate with minimal pushback. We've calculated the figures, Juliet's dad went on, producing a binder they'd obviously assembled beforehand. The expense for the community would run about $2,500 monthly. By selling your place, you'd have sufficient funds to handle it for a long time, and there'd even be extra to, assist Ethan and Juliet with their early marital costs. There it lay, the stark, unvarnished reality. It had nothing to do with my welfare or security. It concerned finances. It involved turning my home into liquid assets to support their unmaintainable way of living. And if I say no, I questioned, though I sensed the response already. Aurora, Ethan stated, his words coming across as practiced. We trust it won't come to harsher steps. But if your cognitive state worsens to where you can't decide logically, the unspoken warning was unmistakable. If I didn't comply willingly, they'd pursue court options to deem me unfit. They'd researched thoroughly. They'd schemed. They'd laid the foundation to seize all I possessed by compulsion if needed. The child I'd nurtured with such affection was right there, permitting outsiders to intimidate his own mom. That evening, once they'd departed following my resolute denial, I wept for the first time in ages, not from grief, but for the absolute demise of the delusions I'd clung to regarding my kin. I'd phoned Carlos right away. I require you to examine something critical immediately. I'd informed him amid sobs. I need the precise details on my son's and his fiancée's actual money matters. All of it. Obligations, earnings, debts, the works. The findings from that probe had been crushing. Ethan made $45,000 yearly as a sales supervisor, yet carried over $80,000 in credit card balances. Juliet did occasional work as a style advisor, pulling in perhaps $4,000 annually, but expended like she earned a top-tier wage. Combined, they were in the red for over $120,000, excluding the borrowings for the ceremony. The unit they leased at $2,000 per month was 3 months overdue. The vehicles they operated were on loans consuming 60% of their joint earnings. Their primary credit line was exhausted, and they'd resorted to cash withdrawals to settle other dues. They were spiraling financially, and my place stood as their sole lifeline. But Carlos's summary included another element that shattered my spirit entirely. Over the prior half year, Ethan had routinely contacted financial institutions and insurers inquiring about advances secured by his aging mom's assets. He'd explored legal steps for gaining monetary authority over older adults. My flesh and blood had been orchestrating my gradual stripping of possessions for months. The most agonizing detail appeared at the report's conclusion. Per a detective Carlos had engaged, Juliet had confided to pals that she'd compromised by committing to an older, less appealing guy since his mom owned prized holdings without rival claimants. To her, wedding Ethan wasn't romance. It was a calculated stake in my holdings. That disclosure had been the tipping point. For weeks, I'd pondered just disclosing my actual monetary status to them, figuring the surprise might prompt a rethink of their conduct. But after absorbing that summary, I realized it wasn't merely about cash or distress. It was about raw, deliberate avarice that had warped my son beyond recognition. The period before the nuptials had been agony. Each call from Ethan brought fresh coercion to rethink my stance. Every drop-in from Juliet featured venomous remarks on my obstinacy and self-centeredness. They'd begun handling me like I was already a doddering elder whose views held no weight. The evening prior to the event, Ethan had launched his ultimate bid. Mom, tomorrow marks the biggest day for me. Please don't spoil it by being uncooperative. Juliet only seeks the best for us all. His statements had sealed that I'd forfeited my son permanently. The guy tying the knot the following day wasn't the lad I'd brought up with such devotion and forfeit. And now, positioned in my vehicle awaiting Carlos, I acknowledged that all paths had converged on this unavoidable juncture. It wasn't driven by vengeance or malice. It was driven by fairness. It was about demonstrating the repercussions of their deeds. It was about instructing them that certain boundaries must remain uncrossed. Another quarter hour and all would shift eternally. My fingers shook as I punched in Joseph's number, my adjacent neighbor, a septuagenarian who'd quietly observed the strained encounters of recent months. Joseph, Aurora here. I must request a crucial service, I stated, my tone quivering. Would you head to my unit and fetch the tan binder from my desk's second compartment? Yes, immediately. It's pressing. Joseph had acted like kin since Robert's passing, and I was certain he'd comply without probing. As I lingered, I recalled our chat from merely a week back. He'd seen from his terrace when Juliet showed up with a property evaluator unannounced. Aurora. That young woman arrived with a fellow carrying a satchel who was assessing your unit externally. He'd shared with evident worry. Upon spotting me, they departed hastily. I disliked this situation entirely. Joseph had been the initial to spot the gradual shifts in Ethan's demeanor lately. Your boy doesn't acknowledge me as before, he'd noted. He once lingered to converse when visiting. Now he hurries through like he's concealing something. His observations had affirmed what my instincts already sensed. I'd lost my son well prior to that evening's strike. The binder I'd sought from Joseph held papers my relatives had never glimpsed. Banking proofs, ownership deeds, asset logs that Robert and I had concealed for years. Papers proving the destitute widow subsisting on a humble retirement was truly a lady with ample means to alter fates with one choice. A decade later, Joseph emerged in the lot clutching the binder. "Aura, what's the matter? You seem deeply troubled," he inquired while passing the items. "It relates to Ethan's ceremony." I outlined concisely the ballroom events, and I observed his features stiffen with each revelation. "That lady's a serpent," he grumbled. "I suspected as much. Joseph, shortly a gentleman called Carlos will show. Upon sighting him, inform him I'm here," I requested. "And Joseph, post tonight, much will alter. Know you've forever been kin to me." His gaze moistened as he assented. "You're kin to me as well, Aurora. Proceed as necessary." While Joseph headed back indoors, I flipped open the binder and scanned items untouched for months. The initial was a banking record displaying a $5,400,000 equilibrium in an asset portfolio. The next was the ownership for a central commercial structure yielding $50,000 monthly in leases. The third was the title to a seaside residence acquired as a venture a decade past. Robert had excelled in placements, beginning with a minor trade venture and evolving it into a discrete domain. Jointly, we'd opted for a humble existence to safeguard our seclusion and household safety. Obvious riches draws issues. Robert often remarked, "Hidden riches grants authority." I never foresaw deploying that authority against my offspring. Every paper in that binder symbolized decades of diligence and astute choices. The floral boutique where I labored thrice weekly wasn't for necessity, but to remain engaged and linked to folks. The aged vehicle I piloted wasn't from fiscal constraints, but from grasping that needless display merely invites troubles. My unit, the one Juliet yearned for so intensely, was in fact the least prized holding in my collection. I'd obtained it not for monetary worth, but for the recollections it contained. It was where Robert and I had passed our final times, where we'd envisioned our tomorrows, where he'd expired in my embrace after a valiant fight against illness. But that binder held another item that would transform all for Ethan and Juliet. For the past trio of years, since my son's monetary woes emerged, I'd covertly settled numerous of his obligations. The card settlements he attributed to job perks were drawn from my funds. The reduced lease he thought he'd bargained was cash I wired monthly. Unbeknownst to Ethan, I'd been funding his reckless habits for years. The plush unit he occupied, the auto he navigated, even portions of the ongoing ceremony's outlays had been enabled by my hidden aid. I'd assumed I was aiding my son through tough phases, unaware I was bankrolling his shift into a stranger. The banking logs revealed monthly wires summing $4,500 that had sustained Ethan's faltering fiscal vessel. Funds he presumed stemmed from career incentives or rebates, when truly it was his mom frantically shielding him from his imprudent choices' fallout. The paradox was shattering. As Juliet demeaned me for burdening their union financially, I was singularly why they could fund that union. As they plotted to deprive me of my unit to resolve their money issues, I'd been resolving those issues secretly for years. I sealed the binder and gazed at the ballroom again. The illuminations persisted. The tunes continued. The attendees kept reveling. But in under 5 minutes, Carlos would appear with the concluding papers I required. In under 5 minutes, the act of severing every monetary link I'd employed to guard a son who'd elected betrayal would commence. This isn't retribution, I assured myself. This is equity. This concerns imparting that deeds bear outcomes, that covetousness carries a cost, that kin isn't tradable for fiscal gain. I'd shielded Ethan from truth overly long, and that shield had twisted him beyond familiarity. Beams from an approaching vehicle lit the lot, dazzling me briefly with pale glow. It was Carlos, timely as ever, bearing the papers that would alter all permanently. I exited my vehicle and advanced toward him, sensing each stride distancing me from the Aurora I'd been and nearing the lady I must evolve into. "Mrs. Hughes," Carlos greeted upon alighting, a juridical dossier tucked beneath his limb. Are you entirely certain? Once we enter, reversal won't be possible. I glanced at the ballroom once more, where my son and his fresh spouse likely still toasted their triumph over the worthless elder they just degraded. I've never been surer, Carlos. It's time they encountered the authentic Aurora Hughes. Carlos unveiled his dossier beneath the lot's illumination and started presenting the items he'd compiled with his typical proficiency. Mrs. Hughes, this is the directive for prompt halt of all fiscal wires you've executed under Ethan Hughes's name, he indicated, gesturing to the primary sheet. Additionally, here's the alert for termination of the rental pact you discreetly backed. The owner will get this tomorrow dawn. I accepted the sheets with quaking yet resolute grasp. Each item signified a link I'd meticulously crafted over years to safeguard my son. And now I was snipping those links sequentially. And the settlement for the venue? I queried, though aware of the reply. Revoked? Carlos affirmed. The advance you'd secured will be retracted this evening. They'll have till tomorrow to secure alternate funding. The scale of my impending action struck me like an icy surge. For 3 years, I'd served as the unseen cushion upholding Ethan and Juliet's existence. The unit they inhabited, the auto he maneuvered, even the ceremony unfolding now had all been feasible via my concealed backing. And now, in one night, I was set to retract that backing irrevocably. Carlos, I need you to grasp something, I conveyed as I endorsed each sheet with a resolve absent for years. This isn't harshness or payback. This is the sole path for them to comprehend things' true worth. Too long I guarded them from their deeds' fallout, and that guard warped them into strangers. I comprehend fully, Mrs. Hughes, Carlos answered with sincere admiration. In my 3 decades advising finances, I've witnessed numerous clans ruined by avarice and thanklessness. Your action demands greater bravery than most hold. His statements supplied the ultimate fortitude for the concluding move. We proceeded jointly to the venue's entry, and with each pace, my pulse quickened. It wasn't anxiety I experienced. It was an odd blend of sorrow for losses and eagerness for regains, my honor, my esteem, my entitlement to humane treatment over exploitation. The melody ceased suddenly upon our entry. 130 sets of gazes shifted our way, and I noted the bewilderment on attendees' countenances. Some identified Carlos at once. He had managed fiscal issues for various notable clans in town for years. His attendance at gatherings typically signaled a major event. Juliet reacted first. Why are you back, Aurora? She yelled from the dance area's core, where she'd been capturing images with Ethan. You departed already. Wasn't that sufficient spectacle for tonight? Her tone held that familiar haughtiness, but I detected an anxious undertone absent earlier. Everyone, Carlos announced clearly and expertly. Sorry for disrupting this event, but I have pressing juridical issues to address with Mr. Ethan Hughes and Mrs. Juliet Dawson. The ensuing hush was profound enough to detect the ventilation's drone. Some attendees retrieved mobiles, intuiting an exceptional occurrence. Ethan neared gradually, his complexion ashen and gaze brimming with perplexity. What's this about, Mom? He inquired in a tone lacking prior assurance from my degradation. Who's this, and why mention juridical issues? I observed his fingers quiver faintly as he fixed his neckwear, a habitual tic from youth. Ethan, I declared in a steadier tone than months prior. Meet Carlos Jones, my fiscal and juridical consultant. He's here to present papers I believe you'll deem quite revealing. Carlos accessed his dossier and extracted the initial item. Mr. Ethan Hughes, consider this notice that the monetary assurance your mom supplied for your rental has been revoked forthwith. Your owner will learn tomorrow dawn, and you'll have a month to secure a fresh backer or depart the premises. Ethan's hue vanished entirely. Monetary assurance, he whispered, eyeing me with dawning awareness and dread. Mom, what's he referring to? Yet his look suggested partial knowledge. For years, he'd harbored doubts about his fiscal fortunes being unnatural, but opted against inquiries lest answers discomfort. Moreover, Carlos pressed on unyieldingly. The $4,500 monthly wires your mom directed to your accounts are now ceased indefinitely. This covers card settlements, vehicle coverage, and sundry costs you assumed originated elsewhere. Juliet emitted a sharp intake that resounded. That's absurd, she cried, dashing our way, her gown trailing. Ethan lacks a wealthy mom. Observe her lifestyle, her attire, her ride. She's an elder subsisting on paltry aid. Her frenzy was palpable, and various attendees whispered with rising intrigue. Lastly, Carlos stated, retrieving the final paper, the assured funding for this gathering is also revoked. The venue staff may require complete settlement before departures tonight. His declaration detonated like an explosive, and I noted some attendees edging toward exits uneasily. The insight struck Ethan like a blow. You, he breathed, regarding me with eyes struggling to absorb. It was you throughout. You funded it all. His tone fractured on the end, and briefly, I glimpsed the young lad he'd been, exposed and baffled. For 3 years, Ethan, I verified in an oddly composed tone amid my turmoil. 3 years believing I aided you past hardship. 3 years trusting you'd rebound and embody the man I fostered. 3 years hoping you'd recall instilled principles. Juliet started circling, gripping her skull in mounting panic. This isn't occurring. This isn't factual. She wailed as attendees observed with dread and intrigue. You're a destitute elder. You labor at a Bloom store. You pilot a decade-old auto. You lack funds. Looks deceive. Juliet, I remarked at last, sensing years of deliberate facade conclude. For years, I elected simplicity since my spouse, and I held that overt riches invites woes. Prove correct. Just woes from unforeseen quarters. The tunes had halted utterly, and the sole noise was the newlyweds' ragged breaths and attendees' escalating whispers, grasping the unforeseen spectacle. Some recorded via devices, sensing legendary potential. Mom, Ethan voiced fractured. Please, some fix must exist. The ceremony, the crowd, all. But his gaze revealed grasping loss of scale, not merely funds or aid. He'd lost his mom, who'd cherished him without condition for 35 years. The sole fix, Ethan, I responded, was avoiding breakage initially. The venue's hush grew oppressive. 130 attendees paused breaths while digesting. Juliet froze initially that evening, her gaze flitting among Carlos, papers, and me, seeking reality's flaw crumbling her. Ethan merely fixed on me with an indelible look, blending jolt, delayed insight, and utter terror. Mrs. Hughes, Carlos projected audibly. Shall I continue with complete fiscal specifics? His query dangled like a blade above the pair. I noted attendees nearing, captivated by unfolding theater. Yes, Carlos, I answered with unforeseen calm. Truth merits full exposure. Juliet attempted a frantic yelp interruption, but Carlos gestured onward and proceeded with surgical accuracy. In the past 36 months, Carlos commenced, referencing papers. Mrs. Aurora Hughes has wired $162,000 total to fund her son Ethan Hughes's and fiancé's living costs. This encompasses $48,000 for leases, $44,000 for cards, $18,000 for auto coverage, and $22,000 for assorted. A shared ripple traversed the venue. Some exchanged stunned looks. Others computed figures via devices. Juliet's mom, seated at the primary table amid clash, rose gradually, visage drained. Additionally, Carlos advanced unstoppably. Mrs. Hughes assured this event's full expense, covering venue, meals, tunes, blooms, and images, totaling $53,000. Funds, as stated, unavailable now. Juliet regained voice, but emitted more wail than words. This can't be. It's false. No one holds such sums while living meagerly. She faced attendees for backing, encountering only intrigued, some entertained by her distress. Dear Juliet, I uttered calmly against her turmoil. You've gained a key insight on judging by exteriors. For years, I selected simplicity as Robert and I prized seclusion over show. Wise choice indeed. Ethan stirred, nearing tentatively. Mom, please, an explanation must exist. A resolution path. You can't shatter my existence thus. His tone broke finally, and momentarily maternal ache nearly swayed me. Shatter your existence? I reiterated, fury resurfacing. I'm shattering yours. Wasn't your spouse who struck me before 130? Weren't you idle as I endured shame? Weren't you scheming my home seat? My words Verity echoed like chimes. Various nodded, recalling the instigating scene. Some held clips of Juliet's strike, electronic proof of cruelty sparking this. But that differed, Ethan mumbled, conviction absent. We lacked knowledge. We misunderstood. We assumed real need. His defenses rang hollow even to him, and I noted disdainful glances. Lacked knowledge. I queried, volume rising initially. Unaware of family trap to coerce home sale. Unaware of uninvited evaluator. Unaware of probing incompetency declarations for noncompliance. Each query diminished Ethan's stance. Carlos seized to extract another paper. Mr. Hughes, note your mom has revised her testament. Prior assets for your inheritance now redirect to groups aiding elders against kin mistreatment. This announcement exploded silently. Juliet reeled as struck. You can't. She screeched, facade shattered. We're kin. Ethan's sole offspring. Can't disown over trivial spat. Trivial spat? I echoed, words suspended in charged atmosphere. Thus describe kin plot to rob elder of home? Thus excuse striking groom's mom on wedding? My tone chilled, some flinching. Juliet's dad, silent amid clash, neared with veiled alarm. Mrs. Hughes, emotions run high today. Perhaps private talk later when settled. His manner that of aired wager. Nothing private to debate, I asserted. All stated before humiliators. You publicized, so response public. Attendees' gazes volleyed like match. Carlos shut dossier with sharp click resounding. Mrs. Hughes, papers delivered, explained. Effects commence now. He faced Ethan, Juliet professionally, yet satisfied. Advise consulting your advisors, promptly. Juliet crumbled. She sank to nearby seat, sobbing uncontrollably echoing. All ruined, she whispered tearfully. All planned, labored. Destroyed. Her gown, once pristine, now creased, tear-marked. No, I approached initially post-strike. Destroyed our deceptions, covetousness, disrespect. Destroyed illusion of objectifying sans fallout. I halted before her, compelling upward gaze. This follows confusing benevolence for frailty. Ethan neared wife, resting quivering palm on shoulder. Juliet, fixed path exists. Something doable. Yet his eyes acknowledged lateness. Some spans incinerated irreparably. A fixed way exists, Ethan. I eyed directly sans ache months. Learn hereof. Grow hereof. Evolve to hope selves pre-avarice warp. Tone gentled faintly, still my son despite. But growth sans my aid. Unit legacy. Hard way like others. Venue hushed utterly. All aware witnessing kin ties, final sever. Carlos and I exited, abandoning stunned crowd and pair whose ideal realm crumbled under half hour. As we progressed exitward, silence broke by unforeseen voice. Hold, Aurora. It was Lucy, Ethan's junior sibling, seated rearward amid clash. She dashed our way tearfully, horrified. Aunt Aurora, Lucy voiced quiveringly, unaware entirely. Swear Ethan concealed plans against you. Lucy, perpetual favored niece, 29-year teacher, kept close tie post-Ethan distance. Had known I'd halted them. I paused, eyeing her, spotting lifelong sincerity. Greed masked as affection, ambition devoid of principles, and my attempts to shield him robbed him of learning vital lessons about accountability and repercussions. My words echoed across the grand hall, where the audience hung on every syllable. Carlos had stood quietly to the side during this exchange, but now he stepped forward, whispering something in my ear. Mrs. Hughes, the venue manager, is approaching. It seems he's already aware of the canceled payment guarantee. Sure enough, I spotted a stout man in a suit striding toward us, clutching papers with a stern expression. Mrs. Hughes, the manager said tightly, I've just received a highly irregular notice about a payment cancellation. The contract for this event is secured until tomorrow morning. Can you clarify what's happening? His arrival injected a sharp dose of urgency into the crisis I had just set in motion. Mr. Martinez, I responded, recalling his name from our discreet talks when I had arranged the wedding's financial backing. Due to unforeseen revelations tonight, I've withdrawn the financial guarantee for this event. I nodded toward Ethan and Juliet, who stood frozen in the center of the hall, embodiments of anguish. Martinez surveyed the scene with the seasoned eye of someone who had managed social gatherings for years. And who will cover the payment now? He asked. The outstanding balance is $53,000, covering the venue, catering, music, flowers, and photography. His tone was professional yet unyielding, signaling that the issue demanded immediate resolution. Ethan finally stirred, approaching us with tentative steps. Mr. Martinez, there's got to be some mistake. My mother can't just cancel the payment like that. We're family, this can be sorted out. His voice trembled with a desperation I'd never heard before, the kind that comes with grasping the gravity of one's circumstances. Young man, Martinez replied with strained courtesy. Mrs. Hughes personally and privately guaranteed the funds. She has the legal authority to revoke that guarantee at any time. I now require an alternative payment method immediately, or I'll have to halt the event. Juliet, stumbling forward in her disheveled wedding gown, her makeup streaked with tears, cried out, "You can't do this. It's our wedding day. You can't ruin it over money." Her distress was palpable, and murmurs of unease rippled through the guests. "Ma'am," Martinez countered with increasing resolve, "I'm not ruining anything. I'm adhering to the contract you signed. Without immediate alternative payment, I'll have to ask all guests to leave and suspend all services." His ultimatum landed like a gavel in the ballroom, the stark reality sinking into the crowd. Some guests began gathering their belongings, slipping toward the exits, while others remained captivated by the unfolding drama, unable to look away. "Mom," Ethan said, tears welling in his eyes for the first time since childhood. "Please, I know we messed up. I know we hurt you, but there are 130 people here. Photos, memories, you can't let a fight destroy this." His voice cracked, and for a fleeting moment, I saw the boy he once was. "Ethan," I replied, my calm surprising even myself. "I'm not destroying anything. You did that when you chose greed over love, manipulation over truth, and public humiliation over the respect I deserve as your mother." Each word cut deeply, but they were truths that needed voicing. "But what do we do now?" Juliet pleaded, her gaze darting to the departing guests. "How do we explain this? How do we pay for it all?" Her panic was unmistakable, the weight of her actions dawning on her. "You'll do what responsible people do," I said firmly. "You'll earn money honestly, live within your means, and learn the value of hard work instead of expecting handouts." My voice grew steady, channeling years of hard-earned wisdom. Carlos leaned in quietly, murmuring, "Mrs. Hughes, the legal paperwork is finalized. All documents are delivered. There's nothing more to do here." His message was clear. It was time to leave Ethan and Juliet to face the fallout of their choices. Lucy approached, wrapping me in a tight embrace. "Aunt Aurora, you'll always have my respect and love, no matter what happens with Ethan." Her words soothed my wounded heart, a reminder that not all family was tainted by greed. "And you'll always have mine, Lucy," I replied, returning her embrace. "Let this night guide your future choices. Character is defined not by what we possess, but by how we treat those we love." Her tears dampened my shoulder as she nodded, fully grasping the lesson unfolding before her. Martinez returned, his urgency sharper now. "Ladies and gentlemen, I need a resolution now. I have other obligations tonight, and I can't keep staff here indefinitely without payment assurance." His patience was wearing thin, intensifying the already fraught situation. "You have my number," I said to Ethan and Juliet one last time. "When you're ready to discuss respect, values, and responsibility, when you've learned to earn what you want and can offer a sincere apology for tonight's betrayal, we can talk. But first," I added, meeting their eyes, "you'll need to clean up the mess you've made on your own." With that, I turned and walked toward the exit with Carlos, leaving behind a ballroom steeped in chaos, despair, and the bitter reality of consequences earned. 3 days later, my apartment had become a sanctuary of tranquility I hadn't known in years. Joseph visited each morning, bringing coffee and pastries from the nearby bakery, ensuring I was coping after what he called the night Aurora reclaimed her strength. His visits were a balm, affirming that I had a chosen family who valued me for who I was. The phone rang relentlessly. Ethan called 37 times, his messages shifting from anger to desperate pleas. Juliet sent 14 texts, each more frantic than the last. Her parents appeared at my door twice, demanding I fix the chaos I'd caused, but I stood firm with a composure that surprised me. That morning, Carlos arrived with news that, while anticipated, was crushing in its scope. "Mrs. Hughes," he said as we sipped tea on my balcony, "I have updates. Ethan and Juliet were evicted from their apartment yesterday. The venue has begun legal action to recover the $53,000 owed, and their credit cards have been canceled for non-payment." "Where are they now?" I asked, though I suspected the answer. "With Juliet's parents," Carlos replied. "A 2-bedroom apartment with 3 people already. It's a strained situation, to say the least." His understated tone hinted at a far harsher reality. That afternoon, as I tended to my balcony plants, I saw a familiar car pull up. It was Lucy, accompanied by Amelia, my old friend from real estate, and, surprisingly, Joseph. "Aura," Lucy called from the sidewalk. "We need to talk. There are things you must know." When they reached my apartment, their faces carried a mix of urgency and worry that put me on edge. "Aunt Aurora," Lucy began, clutching a folder that looked as official as the one Carlos had at the wedding. "I've been digging since that night. There are things you need to know before it's too late." "Too late for what?" I asked, pouring tea while trying to stay composed. Amelia cleared her throat. "Aurora, for the past 3 days, I've been investigating. What I found is worse than we imagined." She opened the folder, revealing documents that turned my stomach. "Juliet has been consulting lawyers specializing in senior mental competency cases for over a year, planning to declare you incompetent and seize your properties." Joseph, silent until now, leaned forward gravely. "There's more, Aurora. After you left the ballroom, I overheard Juliet on the phone saying the old woman ruined everything. But we still have Plan B." The word sent a chill through me. "Plan B?" I echoed, my stomach tightening with fear and fury. Lucy squeezed my hand. "Aunt Aurora, they've been telling people you're senile, using the wedding scene to claim you've lost touch with reality. They're building a case to have a judge declare you unfit to manage your affairs." The depth of their betrayal hit me like a festering wound. It wasn't enough to humiliate me publicly or plot to take my home. They were now twisting my justified reaction into proof of mental instability. The malice was beyond anything I'd thought possible. "That's not all," Amelia added, her voice shaking. "Juliet has been spreading rumors in the neighborhood about your erratic behavior, urging neighbors to report anything concerning about you." The calculated nature of her smear campaign left me breathless. Carlos, arriving for our meeting, stepped into the tense atmosphere. "Mrs. Hughes, I see you've learned about their recent moves." His expression was graver than ever. "I have news confirming your friend's findings. Ethan filed a preliminary petition yesterday, asking a court to assess your mental competency based on irrational behavior and erratic financial decisions. He submitted sworn statements from wedding guests." "Sworn statements?" I asked, anger overtaking shock. "What kind?" Carlos reviewed his papers. "Statements calling your reaction an unprovoked outburst against an innocent couple, describing your financial choices as vindictive, and suggesting you're no longer capable of rational decisions." Lucy gripped my hand tighter. "Aunt Aurora, they've convinced several guests to sign declarations. Most didn't understand the context. They just saw an older woman confronting newlyweds." "But there's good news," Joseph interjected, his smile cutting through the tension. "More people support you than they realize." He showed me a social media video on his phone, viewed thousands of times. "Aurora, some guests recorded that night, and the videos have gone viral. People don't see a senile woman attacking a couple. They see a dignified woman exposing years of abuse and manipulation." Amelia leaned in. "The comments are overwhelmingly supportive, praising your courage and boundaries. Some share their own stories of family abuse. You've become a beacon for resisting elder exploitation." Carlos nodded. "This public support will be crucial if it goes to court. It's hard to claim incompetence when thousands applaud your actions' logic and justice." I made a decision I'd been mulling over for 3 days. If Ethan and Juliet want a public legal fight, they'll see who they're up against. I walked to my desk, where I'd prepared my own folder. I've been working with elder abuse lawyers, documenting their intimidation, threats, and conspiracy, including photos of my swollen cheek from Juliet's slap at the wedding. I held up the medical evidence. If they want war, they'll get it on my terms with truth on my side. I smiled, surprising myself. And I'm doing something I should have done years ago. I'm telling my story publicly, showing the world what happens when greed masquerades as family love. The room buzzed with the energy of allies united by justice. 6 months later, I sat in the city's top television studio, awaiting an interview on Stories of a Lifetime to share my story with the nation. The wedding videos had amassed over 2 million views, making my experience a symbol of resistance against elder abuse. Journalist Catherine Diaz, known for her integrity, reviewed her notes as technicians adjusted lighting. "Mrs. Hughes," she said warmly, "your courage has inspired thousands. We've received hundreds of letters from viewers in similar situations." Much had changed. Ethan and Juliet's legal case collapsed when Carlos presented evidence of their conspiracy. They were fined for frivolous litigation and ordered to pay my $45,000 legal fees. Bankruptcy followed swiftly. Ethan lost his job amid the scandal, and Juliet's image consulting business failed due to her ruined reputation. They now lived in a one-bedroom suburban apartment, scraping by with part-time jobs. The program director announced, "We're on in 5 minutes." I faced the cameras, a mix of nerves and resolve, with Carlos beside me to discuss the legal aspects and Joseph, Lucy, and Amelia in the audience. Ethan's silence since the case hurt most, no apologies, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, as if hating me was easier than facing his actions. Juliet, however, sent messages evolving from threats to pleas for help. Her last text 2 weeks prior read, "Aurora, we made mistakes, but we're family. Ethan's sick with stress, and I'm pregnant. Please don't let your grandchild grow up in poverty." The news of my grandchild stung, but I'd learned I couldn't save those unwilling to change. "Mrs. Hughes, 30 seconds, Catherine said. I thought of the viewers who'd shared their stories of family abuse. Seniors stripped of finances, parents blackmailed, grandparents threatened. The camera's red light glowed, and Catherine began. "Good evening. Welcome to Stories of a Lifetime. I'm Catherine Diaz, and tonight we're joined by Aurora Hughes, a 68-year-old whose story has sparked a national conversation about elder abuse." She turned to me. 6 months after your son's wedding, how does it feel to know your story has inspired so many?" "I'm grateful," I replied, my voice steady. "Grateful that my pain has helped others. For months, I felt alone, questioning myself. Now I know this is more common than we admit." She nodded. "Tell us about the years before that night, when you noticed something was wrong with your son and his fiancée." I recounted the subtle signs, comments about my age, hints I couldn't manage alone, pressures to make decisions benefiting them. "Family abuse starts quietly," I said, "eroding your confidence, making you doubt your reality." Carlos added, "Aurora's experience reflects a common pattern in elder abuse, manipulation disguised as care." Catherine asked, "When did you decide to reveal the truth about your finances?" "When Juliet slapped me in front of 130 people for refusing to surrender my apartment," I said. "I realized protecting them meant enabling abuse. It was about protecting myself." The 45-minute interview covered my hidden financial support, their conspiracy, and the legal battle. I aimed to educate about warning signs and resources. Near the end, Catherine asked, "Do you have a message for your son if he's watching?" I faced the camera. "Ethan, I'll always love you because you're my son. But love doesn't mean tolerating abuse or sacrificing dignity. My heart is open, but only if you accept responsibility and become the honorable man I raised you to be." To the audience, I added, "You deserve dignity at any age. You have the right to control your money, home, and life, and to seek help when boundaries are crossed." The studio erupted in applause as the camera stopped. Catherine hugged me, tears in her eyes. That was one of the most powerful interviews I've done. Driving home with Joseph, Lucy, and Amelia, I felt peace. I told my truth and helped others. Lucy said, "You've turned your worst experience into protection for thousands." My apartment, once coveted, was now a haven of peace, not because I'd won a legal fight, but because I'd learned to demand respect. I'd shown that sometimes saving a relationship means risking its loss, and it's never too late to stand up for yourself. 2 years later, I sit on my balcony, reflecting on a life transformed. The morning begins with a call from Carmen, coordinator of the Aurora Hughes Foundation for the Protection of Seniors, funded by my redirected inheritance. "Aurora, we have 23 new cases this week," she says, her voice blending sadness and resolve. Each case mirrors my past. A 72-year-old woman whose daughter sold her house for personal gain, a 69-year-old man blackmailed by his twins. My pain has become my purpose, helping over 400 seniors reclaim their finances, properties, and self-worth. Joseph, now the foundation's vice president, gives lectures on spotting manipulation. Lucy, living next door after her divorce, leads our educational efforts, finding purpose in teaching respect. My book, When Love Hurts, a bestseller with 200,000 copies sold, funds the foundation. Carlos, our accountant, has recovered $3 million in assets for victims. I miss the Ethan I thought I knew, but not the years of manipulation. His 3 attempts to contact me, after the interview, his son Oliver's birth, and Juliet leaving him, were pleas for money, never apologies. I hung up during our last call when he said, "Your pride is more important than your grandson." I replied, "My dignity is as important as my grandson, and I hope he learns that better than you did." Oliver, now 14 months, doesn't know me, but a trust fund awaits him at 18. Amelia believes he may seek me out one day. My health has improved remarkably. No more insomnia, headaches, or anxiety. At 70, I'm healthier than at 68, teaching at a community garden and mentoring women like Margaret, who reclaimed her stolen savings. My story lacks a fairy tale reconciliation, but offers authenticity and purpose. I tell the Aurora of 2 years ago, be brave. Pain awaits, but so does a life more authentic than you imagined. Tomorrow, I meet senators about elder protection laws. Next week, I open our 3rd regional center. Next month, a documentary series begins. My life is richer, proving that ending toxic ties is liberation, true family is chosen, and it's never too late to rewrite your story. Did you connect with my story? What city are you in? Share in the comments. Support me with a super thanks to keep these stories coming. Check out 2 new stories on the screen, explore my channel, and subscribe. See you in the next story with love and respect.